Now, from the Pope John Paul II Cultural Center in Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome to The World Over Live. It is Holy Week, and we have some great guests for you tonight. Coming up later, we'll discuss the embattled and shrinking Christian presence in the Holy Land with Father Peter Vasko, the president of the Franciscan Foundation for the Holy Land. Later, we'll talk with Cardinal Joseph Zen. He's the retired Bishop of Hong Kong, about the state of relations between the Vatican and Communist China. And finally, actor-director Tim Kelleher joins us to talk about his new film, The Creed, exploring the importance of the Nicene Creed. But forget the royal wedding. The beatification of John Paul II is coming up on May 1st. Starting next Thursday, April 28th, we'll be reporting from Rome. I'll be joined by Father Raymond de Sousa, Cardinal Raymond Burke, George Weigel, our own Rome Bureau Chief Joan Lewis, and many others. We'll bring you live coverage of both the Vigil service on Saturday and the Beatification Mass at St. Peter's on Sunday. EWTN News brings you the most complete coverage of this historic event available anywhere. And for a glimpse of what you can expect, here's a preview in tonight's Vaticano.
One of the highlights among the events scheduled for the beatification of John Paul II will be a vigil, a prayer vigil to invoke Our Lady and the mysteries of light that John Paul II wanted to include, like on the evening of April 2nd, 2005 in St. Peter's Square. This is why hundreds of thousands of pilgrims will be invited to the Circus Maximus in Rome to prepare for the beatification of the Pope. The event will take place on the evening of Saturday, April 30th, as Cardinal Agostini Vallini, the Pope's Vicar General for Rome, explains. It will be a prayer vigil in a link-up with 5 sanctuaries around the world, all of them visited by John Paul II. From these sanctuaries we will hear excerpts of the Pope's speeches. Specifically, the sanctuaries will be those of Divine Mercy in Poland, the sanctuary the Pope visited in Africa, in Tanzania, Guadalupe in Mexico, a sanctuary in Lebanon, and we will end up with Fatima. The idea is that it be a universal prayer of thanks for the gift of this great Pope. The beatification celebration itself will be presided over by Pope Benedict XVI on May 1st in St. Peter's Square. So we will all have the joy of sharing in this solemn beatification on the day when he himself wanted the whole Church to turn her eyes and prayers to divine mercy. People coming for the beatification will want to venerate the remains of the Blessed, and they'll be able to do that from the afternoon of May 1st in St. Peter's Basilica, day and night. On the morning of May 2nd, again in St. Peter's, the Cardinal Secretary of State, Tarcisio Bertone, will preside over a Mass of Thanksgiving, and the remains of John Paul II will be placed in the chapel of St. Sebastian in St. Peter's Basilica. People want to participate spiritually in this event. They want to hear again the message that this great Pope left us, a message regarding a more mature faith and commitment of the Church.
When we return, Father Peter Vasko is here to discuss the situation faced by the fledgling Christian community in the Holy Land. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Once again, Raymond Arroyo.
My next guest is no stranger to the show. He's the president of the Franciscan Foundation for the Holy Land, an organization dedicated to giving voice to the Christian minority in that embattled region. He joined me in studio recently to offer an update on the plight of Christians in the Holy Land and the prospects of a lasting peace in the Middle East. Here's Father Peter Vasko. So many people I've spoken to in recent weeks, they know that I've interviewed you for so many years. You have, of course, a series on the network. And they say, so the Christians are leaving the Holy Land. So what? It's probably better for them if they live elsewhere. They're safer. They have more access to jobs. Why is that a problem for these Palestinian Christians?
Well, when somebody says that to me, and it's a critique that comes quite frequently, I simply say, look, if we don't have a sense of our religious roots and heritage, if we don't have a sense of who we are as Christians, then how can we call ourselves followers of Christ? This is where our historical roots come from. It is the cradle of Christianity. As we all know, the three founders, there was only Jesus who was born there. Muhammad was born in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, and Abraham was born in Iraq and Ur. But it was only Jesus, the founder of Christianity, that was born there. So we have a very, very big stake there. Very big stake.
Tell me, what are the demographics at the moment? What are the statistics? How many people are staying and remaining as opposed to the recent past?
Well, when we started this foundation 15 years ago, to stem the Christian exodus, 500 families were leaving every year. We've done some statistics. Now it's only 400 families leaving every year. So it was reduced by 100 families, generally speaking. This is a long-term problem. It's not going to be resolved in the next 10, 20, 30 years, but we have to start moving. And we have done that, and it's been accomplished. We have now about 150,000 Christians across the board out of 9 million people in the Holy Land, including Israel proper and the territories.
Now, tell me about the types of initiatives that the Franciscan Foundation for the Holy Land is engaged in to keep people in their native land. And is it working?
Well, I think the major solution in stemming the Christian exodus has been providing college education, scholarship grants to these young Christian students who are economically marginalized, but show great academic acumen. And so over the years, the last 14 years that we've been giving these scholarships out, 70% of these students are now pharmacists, dentists, educators, engineers, and they are now saying they were the ones who were going to leave. So giving them an opportunity to have an education so that they can become a professional, so that they then could be able to afford housing, that's the secret.
But how do you keep them there? How do you ensure once you give out a scholarship that they remain? Do they sign a contract where they'll stay for a certain number of years?
They do sign a contract that upon graduation they will stay in the Holy Land for 3 years, but that we will attempt to assist them in finding a job in Jerusalem or Bethlehem or what have you in the Holy Land.
The unemployment situation here is pretty dire.
Yes. In the West Bank, it's about 65%.
Oh, my God.
In Israel proper for Palestinians, it's probably around maybe 30%.
And 65% of these Palestinians are beneath the poverty line.
Under $4,000.
$4,000 a year.
I don't know how they do it.
Yeah,
I don't know how they do it.
One of the breakdowns I saw said $4,000 a year.
I don't know how they do it, Raymond.
Tell me about the increasing difficulty as we're moving forward now, and we're seeing these rebellions breaking out all over the Middle East. Surely there is, and as unrest follows a lot of these rebellions, that's got to be affecting the Palestinian Christians in your area.
Well, we have to understand that it's more of a question of, are there going to be an increase of militant Muslims taking over these governments? Is it going to be, for example, a radical group called Muslim Brotherhood? I mean, they're very, very dangerous. As you know, in Egypt, it was a soft military coup. And now they have about 4 or 5 political parties, one of them being the Muslim Brotherhood. So the fact is Christians are concerned, but the fact is they know, basically, that they're safe in Israel, okay, because Israel can be compared to Libya, Tunisia, and Egypt. So they feel a bit safe. But there has always been an undercurrent of militant Muslims in Jerusalem, attacking Christians from time to time, smashing their stores from time to time. It's not very rampant, but it's there. Obviously, if these countries are now governed by militant Muslims, then Israel as a whole is in trouble, as well as the people who are there, including the Christians and the fellow Muslims.
Give us a sense. You touched on it there. What is it like for these Palestinian Christians? They have lived in these communities for generations. They are the native people of this land, and yet they're sort of sandwiched between Israelis who are suspicious of them on one side and Muslim Palestinians who are equally suspicious of them.
Well, I think you have to use the word militant Muslims, not the regular general populace. Militant Muslims look upon our Christians as pro-West and traitors to the Islamic cause. The some of the policies of the certain bodies of the Israeli government look upon them, as you so stated, as suspicious. They're Arab, they're Palestinians, and hence the enemy. And as you just said a few minutes ago, they are sandwiched in between. And the fact is, they have no world government helping them. They have no organizations really helping them, and they're the ones who are leaving. And so there's that constant tug and pull. I can tell you very frankly that when they had the Oslo Accords, and they were trying to separate the city, the old city, into two quarters, one for the Israelis, one for the Palestinian Authority. Most of the Christians said, no, we are not going to say if that happens, because if part of that city was completely run by the Palestinian Authority, especially the majority of Muslims, then they would have problems in securing jobs and schooling, etc. Said there would be a lot of discrimination on the part of militant Muslims that are living there in the old city.
But that militancy is gaining hold throughout.
Yes, it is. It's very scary.
Spreading.
It is spreading. Indeed, it is. And the Christians, certainly they are concerned about that. What if more Hamas get involved? And Hamas right now are in Gaza. They're not in the Holy Land. They're not in Jerusalem. There are some in Bethlehem, but it's a very a quiet scene in Bethlehem with the Hamas, but they do exist there. So there's that constant concern, worry that what's going to happen to them. But we really can't solve the political problems for our Christians. All we can do is give them an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to become a professional person, so they can then have motivation and incentives to remain in the Holy Land. And that's what we're doing. We're never going to resolve the political problem. That's going to be an ongoing situation, unfortunately. But we can at least in the midst help the Christians.
But they are really representatives in some ways of peace, because they have coexisted here with the Islamics, with Jews for so long. It's when you begin to pull that Christian minority from the equation, things can get awfully dicey, because then there's no buffer. There's no one that shares any neighborhood or blood or anything with the people surrounding them.
Well, a good point was that, remember the seizure of the Holy Sepulchre? And it was the Christian mediators, it was the hierarchy, it was the Franciscans who were talking to both sides, trying to have a solution, and eventually after 31 days, that solution was made. But Christians had a very large part to play in that, and so what you so stated as mediators is quite true.
How are you all treated now? How are you viewed?
Among who?
Among both sides, both the Israeli government as well as you referred to them as radicalized Muslims.
We basically have no problem with the Israelis, the Franciscans, nor the Muslim. We have a good rapport with both. Sometimes, for example, certain departments like the Ministry of Interior Affairs for Israel, who's run by the Shash party, have given us a very difficult time in securing visas for our clergy.
Palestinian clergy.
Palestinian.
And faithful, we're trying to get
to and fro. It's been a big problem. We didn't have that problem before, but unfortunately, the politics in Israel. Shash is ultra-conservative with a lot of ultra-Orthodox. I mean, we're here, but they're not going to be definitely good friends of us.
Tell me the situation with the settlements in the West Bank. We've been reading a lot about this. Those settlements don't seem to be going anywhere. These are Israeli settlements in what had been previously carved out as Palestinian land, correct?
Yes, and what has sort of has caused more problems and exacerbated the situation is the wall. If you talk to a Palestinian, it's called the Apartheid Wall. If you talk to an Israeli, it's called the separation barrier. Look, there's nothing wrong with building a wall, but build it according to the United Nations international agreements, borders that everybody agreed to. In that particular wall, 46,000 acres of private property was taken from Palestinians, both Christians and Muslims, who had deeded property. I mean, I understand the Israeli point of view.
You need security.
And it certainly has helped. It prevented a lot of these suicide bombers. It has done its job, but it's a two-edged sword, Raymond. And what happens to the other side? Obviously, it's a constant conflict between the two. There are young people, 16, 18 years old, who were born in Bethlehem, still have not been able to go to Jerusalem 6 miles north of Bethlehem. They see it, but they can't. And this is their country, and it's been very, very terrible. A great stress for the Christians, especially in the West Bank and such as Bethlehem.
Yeah. Tell me about the importance of pilgrimages to the region. And there was recently a synod on the Middle East in Rome, and one of the bishops suggested that the Pope authorize and indeed compel the bishops of the world to go and visit the Holy Land one at a time to keep the business brisk, but also I think to raise awareness of what it's like to be a Christian in these territories.
I think what the Christians in the Holy Land need is moral support. Okay, yes, from time to time they give the financial support. They need moral support. They have to see Christians from around the world coming, talking with them, seeing that they also are part of this great mystical body of Christ. And let me tell you, when local Christians see young people, young Christians and older Christians from America, from Canada, from around the world coming, they're strengthened. They're strengthened internally, interiorly, because they need that support. And for myself, on my pilgrimages, I make sure that one evening they meet some of the young Christians who were successful in securing jobs, as I told you earlier, and to have that dialogue back and forth with them. They become great adherents of the Christian problem in the Holy Land, great adherents for the foundation. So pilgrimages, I think, is a time where one is called by God. I don't think it's a decision that you generally make. You do make a decision, but I think it's a calling. And when my experience as a guide in pilgrimages, I think when somebody comes to the Holy Land, the Lord wants to do one, two, or three things for you. He wants to heal you of something. He wants to guide you in something. Or he wants to touch your heart. And Raymond, I have hundreds of letters. When people got back to the United States, one of those gifts were given, or two of the gifts were given to these people, these pilgrims. And it just shows their lives have changed, okay, spiritually, etc. How many years have we've heard priests talk in the pulpit about the birth of Christ, Bethlehem, the crucifixion of Christ, the tomb of Christ, and they're there. They're touching the tomb. They're touching Calvary. They're touching the place of the God where he was born. Those are things that nobody. It's such a pattern of internal consolation that nobody can explain that to you. But this is what it's all about. Yes.
When you go out there and you see that and you touch it and you're there, it is one of those amazing experiences. In fact, we should go back and take a group, maybe of viewers, and do a pilgrimage. So I'd love you to lead that someday.
Yes, I would love to do that.
It would be a great trip.
Sure.
Final question. What are we missing about this region, about the plight of Christians in the Holy Land, and the work you're doing every day at the foundation?
In the sense that...
Well, what are we missing here? I mean, I think we look at this from afar, and we see these riots happening all around. We see the controversies about the wall. What are we missing? What's the daily struggle of these Christians? What's the day-to-day life that perhaps we've lost sight of or don't see?
I think it's the quiet suffering that they endure each day, the humiliations at checkpoints, the immobility of going from one place to another. And these are sufferings that Christians really have in this land. They don't say too much about it, but they are suffering. Unemployment, not being able to put food on the table. These are things that form that whole nucleus of suffering as Christians. And, we're told and the Bible says, Scripture says, to turn the other cheek. And in fact, these Christians have turned the other cheek for many, 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 many years. And in a way, this is their strength. It's not their weakness. And so this is what they're going through.
For more on Father Peter's work and the efforts of the Franciscan Foundation for the Holy Land, visit ffhl.org. When we return, we'll discuss the relationship between the Vatican and China with Cardinal Joseph Zen, former Bishop of Hong Kong. He has a huge difference of opinion with some at the Holy See. He'll tell you why when The World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. He's known as the conscience of China, the former Bishop of Hong Kong, Cardinal Joseph Zen. He visited Capitol Hill recently to make leaders there aware of the way the Chinese government is dividing the Catholic Church. There's a government-run Catholic Patriotic Association loyal to the Chinese government and an underground church loyal to the Pope. And though it appeared relations between the Vatican and China might be improving, recent events tell a different tale. Cardinal Zen recently wrote a piece criticizing certain congregations at the Holy See for defying the Pope's will with regard to China. We brought you some of this interview a few weeks ago. Tonight is the complete interview. Take a look. I want to start with your take on how the Chinese government views the Roman Catholic Church. And by Roman Catholic Church, I mean those elements, those faithful in the country loyal to the papacy. How are they viewed? How are they regarded?
I think the communists had always one policy, that is to control the church. And since they cannot accept double loyalty to the country and loyalty to one's own religion, they want to separate the Catholics from Rome. That's their only goal.
So we have this patriotic association, which is nothing more than the Chinese government's creation. Yeah. And they have taken over churches, they have clergy, they have bishops, they ordain bishops. And then you have what I've always described as the underground church. Now, increasingly, Your Eminence, people tell me you shouldn't refer to the faithful in that way. You, Raymond, in your reportage, are dividing the people. Please tell me your perspective.
This wrong policy has made our underground community frustrated, they fear abandoned, even considered inconvenient, disturbing. But actually, they are the people who have been loyal to the Holy See, have suffered so many years, and now they really have reason to feel frustrated. You see, many old bishops died in that community, and they are not given successors. While in the official church, many bishops are being ordained. And so surely that doesn't seem to be fair. And the trouble is that even the letter of the Holy Father
in 2007,
yeah, in which he had many words of encouragement to this underground community, has been wrongly interpreted. And that misinterpretation could go on for so long. Obviously, with the blessing of somebody on high in the Holy See. And they are saying that, oh, everybody should come out from the underground, and because the Holy Father wants everybody to be united. But that's a wrong interpretation. The Holy Father is talking about reconciliation. Reconciliation of hearts, of spirits, but not a reunification in one structure, because that is simply impossible.
I keep hearing repeatedly, even from people in China, they say, well, you have the Patriotic Association, but many of the faithful there, many of the bishops, many of the priests in the Patriotic Association are secretly loyal to Pope Benedict. Do you believe that?
I was the first to say that back in 1989, because I had a privileged opportunity to go to teach in the seminaries in China, Actually, I was the first one to request and then to be accepted to teach in those seminaries. I started right after Tiananmen Square incident, so 89 till 96, when they made me the coadjutor bishop in Hong Kong. So for 7 years, I worked 6 months a year in China. And then with my great pleasure, consolation, I discovered even in the so-called open church, everybody in their heart loyal to the Holy See. So I said publicly that we have only one church because everybody loved the Pope. That was true, but in the following years, many things changed. The Holy See, the Holy Father, was very generous to recognize many of those bishops in the open church who were ordained illegitimately. And then when they started choosing the young bishops in that open church by election, which is mostly manipulated, but still, when the candidate is acceptable, the Holy See approved those candidates. And that was very generous. But the Holy See did not request these legitimate bishops to withdraw, publicly from the particular association. An obvious meaning is that they should work from within that church to change the situation. And that one was made very clear in the letter of the Holy Father of 2007. The Holy Father said, when you receive the communion with the Holy See, you must live coherently with your status. But many didn't do that.
And now we have a situation in November where you have illicit ordinations taking place. Now, I thought the Chinese government said, we will work with the Vatican and we will allow them to appoint the bishops and then approve them. Apparently, that's no longer the policy, because just in November, you had an illicit ordination where bishops, underground bishops, were rounded up and brought to this fake consecration.
Not exactly underground bishops, but bishops already in the open. Actually, bishops are already many years in the open, except the one who is just recently came to the open church. Now, they choose all legitimate bishops to go to that, so very mischievous, you see.
Validly ordained bishops approved by the Vatican.
And then they use the force for some of them to bring them there. But unfortunately, several were not forced to go there. You can see that they are there willingly. So, this was an incredible surprise because for one whole year, there were many 9 ordination of bishops with approval of both parts. Now, you must remember that somebody at that time said, oh, now see, everything's all right. Beijing government accepts the bishop chosen by the Holy Father.
Right.
I said, oh, come on, you are too optimistic. My suspicion is that the Vatican may have made too many concessions. And so it's not necessarily a good thing to have those ordinations.
Okay, interpret that for us, because people don't quite understand what this means. What is the intention of the Chinese government? Is this a provocative gesture to show the Vatican who's boss?
Oh, I think so. I would say it's a slap in the face of the Holy Father. After so many concessions from the Holy See, now in this particular case, the discussion had not yet concluded, so they should wait for a conclusion, and they went on by themselves saying, we don't wait anymore.
Now,
that's really
you
very
recently wrote a piece very critical of the Vatican position and the Vatican relationship with the Chinese government. You called out a triumvirate in Rome. Who are you talking about?
For a long time, the Congregation for Evangelization followed a very wrong policy.
And what is that policy? You charge that it's an appeasement policy.
Yeah.
It's similar to what was done in the Vatican before John Paul II in the relationship between the Vatican and the communist authorities in Russia.
Exactly. You could suspect that long before, but now from the article by Father Hendricks, you see it clearly.
Father Jerome Hendricks, tell us who he is and why you're so opposed to his vision of this relationship.
I'm sorry that we seem to be two enemies. Actually, we worked very well together many years ago, and he is a real China expert. And he did so many good things for the church in China.
And he's a consultant to the congregation on evangelization.
Yes, and now, to carry on those initiatives, he needs always the permission of Mr. Liu Banyan. I suppose you know who is Mr. Liu Banyan.
He is the head of the Patriotic Association in China.
He is de facto Pope of the Open Church. But we all agree that you have to accept that compromise. Now, if you want anything to be done, you need permission of Mr. Liu Banyan. That means he can decide on the list of the bishops taking part in those initiatives. So it was okay for once, twice, but in the long run, we realized that the side effect of those good things are very bad, because you strengthen his position.
Because now we've reached a situation where they're in open defiance of the Holy Father.
He is all-powerful in front of the government. And so they see that the foreigners all obey to him. And then the bishops are more and more slaves under him.
You've written, our bishops needed some supply of courage, but instead they received much misplaced compassion, which pushed them deeper and deeper into the mire of slavish subjection. How do you turn this around, given that this seems to be the approach, at least for the moment, from this congregation in Rome that's responsible for this relationship?
Exactly. Because the Holy Father always speaks about courage. But there is another voice from the Holy See which says, oh, we understand your difficulty. And then they are allowed to go to take part in the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the first illegitimate ordinations. They are allowed to go to this 8th General Assembly. So to contradict the voice in the Holy See.
And they're all being used, essentially, to create this spectacle that is in defiance of the Holy Father. These are men he did not approve for ordination, and that really is the heart of your critique.
Yeah, sure.
Let's talk for a moment about the new appointment of Archbishop Savio Hon, who is the new secretary for at the Congregation for Evangelization, a native Chinese archbishop, being appointed the first, I believe, to get to this level in the Vatican. What does that represent in your mind? What is the Holy Father trying to say through the appointment?
I think everybody knows that Archbishop Savio is a theologian. He's a member of the Theological Commission, the Pontifical. So he worked under Pope Benedict, Cardinal Ratzinger. And so he is surely the one who is very faithful to the teaching of the Holy Father. So I'm full of confidence that he's going to follow the direction in that letter, which unfortunately has been neglected, even misinterpreted. And so I am sure this appointment is, is a statement by the Holy Father that he wants more faithfulness in following his letter.
Well, in an interview with Avvenire, Archbishop Hahn, this newly appointed official, sided with you after your letter came out, and he said here, Cardinal Zen and I with him maintain that the clandestine communities still have reason to exist. Cardinal Zen, who understands very well the Chinese reality and mentality, does not trust the communist authorities very much. He maintains rightly that if the government wants to secure this trust, it must carry out concrete actions that have not been seen so far.
Yeah. You see, the letter was very clear. Very clear.
The 2007 letter of the Pope.
Yeah, it's very clear that the patriotic association is not acceptable. And so they said that the bishops in communion with the Holy See must behave coherently. Unfortunately, for a long time, that didn't happen. And so several of those bishops recently ordained are more on the side of the government than on the side of the church. They are more official of the government than the shepherds of the flock. And Bishop Xavier uses the word opportunists have increased in that group, and that's very, very sad.
So it creates a real long-term schism that's in place.
We have gone back instead of going up.
I want to talk about the wider situation in China. I noticed in the news, and a friend of mine who does business in China said recently a statue of Confucius has been erected in Tiananmen Square. What is happening there? Why? I thought Mao and the Communist Revolution that swept into China, what it did was destroy Chinese culture, including the all of the Confucian thought. What's at play here, Cardinal?
There's only one principle. Anything useful to maintain the party at power is good. Now they think to promote this enthusiasm for Confucius is good to get support from abroad because it seems that they are respecting the traditional culture, but you see, it's all in their strategy of using the religion. Because now they are doing a lot for the religion, you know. They spend much money to have the Buddhists organize international big meetings.
Gatherings and things there.
And they have established many Confucian centers all around the world. And they now give a lot of money to these bishops loyal to the government, Catholic bishops. So they are doing much, but the purpose is to control the religion. Now they don't mind that the religion should survive. They have understood that this is unavoidable. So they just want to manipulate.
Someone was telling me the other day that the Chinese authorities are increasingly aware that there is this vacuum, if you will, that because of the one-child policy, you have so many young men running around with no women to domesticate them and no religion to tame them, and they're very concerned about what this means sociologically. Do you think that may be a bit of why they're turning to even these neutered forms of religion, whether it be the Catholic Patriotic Association or the Confucian thought?
Yeah, everything useful for them to avoid more trouble,
Where do we go from here, and what can Catholics around the world and in the United States do to help their brothers and sisters in this land, who continue to suffer, incidentally, in labor camps and under terrible persecution?
Sure, and especially in the underground, now the community is split because of this confusion. And some try to go into the open, but then they find themselves in a difficult situation because that means to surrender to the government. And those who remain again still in the underground, they feel abandoned by the Holy See. When all the bishops die, they are not given successors. And so it's very, very depressing. Now, I've come to the United States just because I have some suspicion that there is too much optimism around. So I want to come here, tell everybody that, there is still no religious freedom in China.
Yeah, I mean, when you describe your country as a disastrous state,
The
that's
church,
pretty
in
severe.
this moment.
The church there, yeah.
We have touched the button, I think.
What about Hu Jintao, the president of China, the head of the Communist Party in China's visit to the United States? He was treated like a royal when he arrived. The red carpet treatment, a state dinner. But how was that read at home? How did the Chinese view the way he was treated in the United States and the fetting he was given?
I don't think they get scandalized by that. They could anticipate that. Because now the United States needs China.
Yep. Yeah, but the human rights record is abysmal in China.
Yeah.
And the United States should have stood up and clearly made it clear that this is not acceptable on the world scene.
Yeah, but you can see a tweet where a person then tell him that he should improve the human rights record. Yeah. Now, really, the problem is not only for the Catholic Church. We have this persecution of the human rights lawyer in China.
Yep.
They are put into prison. We have this Nobel Prize
winner,
Liu Xiaobo, also condemned to a long sentence. So you cannot be optimistic about the policy in China.
In our final moments here, tell me about the state of those who have been arrested or are under house arrest in the underground church. How severe and widespread is this? Or is this very isolated to certain remote rural districts, as we've been led to believe in some of the press accounts?
But in this century, even isolated incident of imprisonment just because of religion is enormous. We have still 2 bishops in prison for more than 10 years.
Why?
Just because they don't want to surrender to the government. Simply for religious reasons. And they even say, oh, they disappeared. We don't know where they are sometimes. It's ridiculous. But so 2 bishops and a dozen of priests are still in prison. Well, maybe today they don't ill-treat them. They don't torture them.
Right.
But still they are deprived of freedom.
How many people do you think are in the laogai, are in the labor camps in China? I've heard estimates of as much as 1 million people could be in
I don't know
camps.
nowadays because the number of Catholics still in prison in comparison with the past surely are very much limited now. But it's still a shame to have such good people arrested without reason.
Very good. Cardinal Joseph Sen, thank you for coming. Thank you for your outspoken voice, and we hope to see you soon.
So let us pray.
Thank you very much. When we return, we'll discuss a new film, The Creed, with actor and director Tim Kelleher. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
My next guest is an actor, producer, director in Hollywood as well as New York. He's appeared in such films as 13 Days with Kevin Costner, and more recently in the Christopher Nolan hit Inception. He's worked in television and film. He's everywhere. His latest project is a film he's produced and directed for First Things magazine. It's called The Creed, What Christians Profess and Why It Ought to Matter. It's an in-depth examination of the Nicene Creed. Here to tell us all about it, as well as his faith and career in Hollywood, is Tim Kelleher. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Thank you very much.
Great to see you. Tell me, why do a film? And it's really an exploration and a documentary on the Nicene Creed. We hear this every week in Mass. What's the news here?
That's a great question, and it's almost the exact question that almost every person I approached to participate in this asked me. Why are you doing this in the Creed? These theologians, philosophers, and people of faith, and that's a little daunting at first. But then, especially in the case of one person, Tim Schreiber, he said, I don't know what I can add to this. And I get a call like 3 days later. He said, I can't stop thinking about this. I really want to, I'm thinking about the creed all day, and I'm picking it apart, and what a revelation it's been. And we had one person who was, Frederica Matthews Green, who's well known to many in your audience, I would think. That was her first question. Why the creed? I mean, what is it? It's so dry. It's like a list of things. And she said that when she struggled with it, there came a moment where she realized that there was a prayer in that creed as well. But I guess what led us to think this was worth doing, the creed, first of all, is a timeless document. And we live in very vexed times. And I don't know about you, but I can't remember a time where things were more inflamed culturally and even globally. And as Luke Johnson, another one of our participants, puts it, we live in what's called modernity, according to modernity's rules. And modernity is synonymous with secular. And I think Christians are often bullied by elite culture, by people who are, I don't know, hyper-educated, hypo-learned, you know. And oftentimes we're cowed by, their challenges, How do you explain these things? They're nonsense. They're wild fantasies, the flying spaghetti monster, all that kind of stuff. But when you actually look at the creed, it's pretty substantial. It's pretty profound. And we call it a treasure hidden in plain sight. I mean...
and there's some radical claims there that we often lose sight of because, I guess, we're numb through the recitation of it and hearing it all our lives.
Yeah. As Tim Shriver says, and he says, it's one of those things that sits on the shelf, read by rote, spoken by rote, but do we really know what those words mean? Have we experienced what those words mean? And that's kind of the important thing, because the creed is not restrictive the way a lot of people tend to think of it. It's prescriptive, and as John Bear puts it, it provides Christians with the framework within which a meaningful discipleship can take place.
How did you choose this group of theologians to explore the creed with you?
They were people I have admired for one reason or another for a while, except in the case of Tim Shriver, who I do admire. It was a happy accident, frankly. But Stephen Barr, Luke Timothy Johnson.
A lot of these people have written in the pages of First Things over the years as well.
And they're, tops in their fields. So I was, scared to call them. But fortunately, it's First Things, so there's that reputation. So to have the opportunity to sit before some of these people who were so learned was really kind of intimidating. So I had to do my homework. There were certain people who we approached who couldn't do it, mostly for scheduling reasons, but these people were happy to do it.
I want to share with viewers a little clip of the Creed, and this is Tim Shriver talking a bit about pain and suffering and what the Creed has to say about it. Take a look.
Gospels, Jesus weeps. I didn't want to pretend like you're not supposed to weep. I didn't want to pretend like you're not supposed to suffer. I didn't want to pretend like you're not supposed to wonder. And I found the invitation of the Creed in the Holy Spirit as the giver of life. I mean, obviously when you lose a life, to think of it as a gift, their life as a gift, then there's obviously a giver.
I love the way you marry in this not only the observations of the various theologians, but also sacred art, music. How long did it take you to put the film together?
Close to a year. Yeah. It shouldn't have taken that long, but it was what they call a shoestring budget. So.
Tell me about your background, which is really interesting. We met not long ago, and I was just fascinated by that, your involvement with First Things now. But let's start with, you were in a Jesuit seminary for a time.
I was.
And what made you leave that and pursue acting?
Well, I came out of college and I did what I thought was the most important thing I could think to do with my life, which is to enter the Jesuit novitiate. And after almost 2 years there, we parted on good terms. And then I went on to do the silliest thing I could think to do with my life, which was go to acting school and start a theater company. And then you make my way out to Los Angeles and do TV and film. But I think it began to dawn on me when I was studying in New York, studying acting, the power of stories, parables, basically. I mean, you look at the Gospels. What does Jesus do to teach? Stories. And I remember seeing a Martin Scorsese movie called Raging Bull. I did not want to go see it. I had grown up in a neighborhood that had a lot of those kind of characters. I was not interested.
Yeah.
But it was a pretty powerful film. And at the very end, I was just blown away because the screen goes dark, and then there's a quote from John's Gospel. The authorities are asking the man who's been cured of blindness, who was this guy who cured you? Is he the Messiah? Who is he? And he says, I don't know who he is. All I know is I was blind, and now I can see. And to cap the movie with that, I was just, this really is an art form that can actually move people and cause people to think.
And challenge them with...
In a way that maybe essays, don't have the same ability to do.
Well, it's certainly, I'm convinced if the evangelists were alive today, they would surely be filmmakers or in some form of media.
Right.
Certainly. Because it is the tablet, it is the written word. And we have to remember, I think we lose sight of the fact that these stories, these reservoirs of truth, the gospel accounts, were not confined to pages. They were spoken, they were alive, they were part of a lively oral tradition.
Right.
And that has been totally lost, I think, to us in the modern age.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's good that, and what I thought as I watched the Creed is you've recaptured some of that, in that you have people talking about their own experiences and as well as their theological understandings of the Creed.
Thank you for saying that, because one of the things that after about 3 or 4 of these interviews, I began to see a pattern. Every person that's on that film, not only are they learned and in the tops in their fields, but they come across with genuine enthusiasm and a love for what they believe and live. And it's infectious. And I've seen other sort of religious documentaries, not to be unkind, but in this case, there's no parroting. It's genuine, it's passionate, and it's the fruit of a lifelong struggle. And I was just very, very grateful to all of them for that.
It's a fascinating meditation, particularly now as we enter this in Holy Week and entering the Easter octave. It's an interesting way to sort of absorb and rethink something we often take for granted.
Yeah.
I want to shift a little bit. You are the new media editor at First Things. The church has, in recent days, made, I think, timid inroads into this new media. Where do you see things? Where do you think the church is both internationally and domestically?
Well, in my small opinion, well, it's no secret that we're way behind the curve on this, which is ironic because when you think back, the original televangelist was Fulton Sheen.
Yeah.
Not only was he tops in his parochial world, he was tops in the secular world. He had like the #1 show on TV, on CBS, I think.
Yep.
And then we entered an ice age where we disappeared from the scene, basically in a major way, until Mother Angelica came along with EWTN.
Yep.
And I have plenty of Catholic friends who either love EWTN or are cold toward it.
Right.
Same with First Things. They love it or hate it.
Yeah.
But I think if we're honest, you have to acknowledge the astounding achievement that she has made with this, and which you guys continue to do with this network.
Yeah, no, it's
but
amazing
it's a catch-up game.
30 years later, to think that this all came from a little crippled nun who wandered down to Birmingham, Alabama, with no money.
It's a remarkable story.
But again, it's a walk of faith and a work of faith.
And how many decades did John Paul II exhort us to do this, and we didn't? And Benedict to this day, they are, as you say, making inroads. And, I'd love to see Catholic institutions like Catholic University and Catholic schools across the country really not only develop, because some of them are TV and film, media studies programs, but to integrate them with philosophy, theology, architecture, so that these things are...
How has your faith enriched your play, your sense of character and understanding and breaking down characters? Has it helped or has it hurt? Some people would say, you're a member of this faith with such rigid strictures that it's got to confine your imagination and the roles you're willing to accept and the things you're willing to play.
Well, I'm not in a position to turn things down too frequently, but I have. And that's never pleasant. But there have been times also, in fairness, where I got a script and it was too late for me to, I got the script and it was cast on a Friday and I had to start shooting on Monday. And there were some things in the script that were first wrong, factually, and were in dire contradiction to Catholic teaching. Yeah. So I was really between a rock and a hard place. I was able to get in touch with the writer-producer, and it was amazing because he said, well, let me take a look and look at the science of this, first of all. I'll call you back. He called me back within an hour. He said, you're absolutely right, and I'm going to change that. And he said, I got to tell you, my hat's off to you. I mean, I'm a former Catholic, but I'm glad you brought
Flagged
this
this for me.
Yeah, and then after the show aired, about 6 weeks later, I got a call from him that night saying, I want to thank you again.
Wow. So you never know.
You never do know.
You never know.
Yeah.
Well, Tim Kelleher, thank you so much for being on. The film is The Creed, What Christians Profess and Why It Ought to Matter. It's available through First Things at firstthings.com as well as Amazon.com. Before we go, what do you want people to take from this documentary?
It's like I said, it's a treasure hidden in plain sight. There's such richness there, and there's such so many resources. People don't need to be cowed by a bullying, anti-theistic culture. You don't have to be scared.
Very good. Tim Kelleher, I hope you'll come back.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. That's all the time we have. Until next week, you can find updates and the occasional commentary by following me on Twitter or on my Facebook fan page. See, we're trying to keep the social media thing going. Just go to RaymondArroyo.com. You can click through from there. This is also your last opportunity to get your free, fully dramatized Gospel of Mark from the Truth and Life audio Bible. That's also at RaymondArroyo.com. Get it while you can. It's gone next week. Until next week, a blessed Holy Week and happy Easter. We'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, I'm Raymond Arroyo. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week from Rome. Bye now. Thanks again. Wow.